Good evening, everybody. I'm Judy Schlossberg, and I'm chair of the Federation's Women's Philanthropy. And I'm so excited to welcome you to this second joint Lion of Judah Pomegranate Society event for the 2021 annual campaign. While we're not quite out of the woods with this pandemic, we are so thrilled to bring Rachel Gerrol to our community virtually and gather to celebrate and thank you, our pomegranates and lions, for your continued support. I hope you've all enjoyed the delicious Zabar sweets we sent with an extra thank you to you all, and at least have one of the regular, even if you're going to be freezing the rest. We have 64 women of impact on our Zoom tonight. We just took a few minutes to scroll through the pages, and I was going to give you the opportunity, but I guess we've already done that. So, but I do want to remind you that you can put any of your comments into the chat to tell us what you're thinking, what inspired you to become a lion or a pomegranate, and just to send a little message to a friend. So if you all know how to do that, don't hesitate to write anything you think about. As you know, the Lions of Judah are 5,000 plus donors, and our pomegranates are 1,800 plus donors, generously give in their own names toward the Jewish Federation annual campaign. I'm excited to tell you that for the campaign year 2021, which began last September and runs through this June 30th, we have added 8 new lions, 3 new ruby lions, and 12 new pomegranate level donors for a total of close to $100,000 in new dollars to support our Jewish community. To date, we have 138 Lions of Judah and 66 pomegranates for a total of, wait till you get this, $1,138,000 toward the annual campaign. I am so proud of all of you and our community. Thank you so much. And now I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker, Rachel Gerrol, and welcome her family members from Greater Hartford who are joining us tonight. Her mother-in-law, Lisa Gerrol, and her sister-in-law, Sarah Gerrol Leskowski. We welcome you and we thank you, and we thank you for bringing us your beautiful daughter-in-law. We're in for such a treat tonight. Rachel Gerrol is the co-founder and CEO of Nexus, a global community of next-generation philanthropists and impact investors that has over 5,000 members from more than 70 countries around the world, representing families with a total combined net worth of $550 billion. $550 billion. Rachel is an internationally recognized thought leader on social innovation and millennial philanthropy, and her projects have been featured in the New York Times, the Financial Times, the Atlantic, Forbes, and Vanity Fair. Rachel has a really fresh perspective on Jewish philanthropy because of her unique background. She'll share more during her remarks, but I'll give you a little clue. She went on the very first Birthright Israel trip ever, and it completely transformed her life. Today, she's a proud Lion of Judah, and she's also an alumna of the Jewish Federations of North America's National Young Leadership Cabinet and the Wexner Heritage Fellowship. Rachel is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and is married to Lisa Gerrol's son, Spencer. So she has a natural connection to our community, and aren't we lucky? After Rachel speaks to us, Lori Mandel will ask Rachel some of the questions that you put in the chat, or she'll even unmute you if you'd like to and let you ask your question directly to Rachel. So please put your questions in the chat directly to Lori Mandel, and we'll answer them as time allows. Lori may unmute you if you say so to ask your question directly to Rachel. So please let's welcome our very special guest, Rachel Gerrol.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining us this beautiful evening. And I hope you're enjoying your rugula and your other gifts from Zabar's. If you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be speaking at a Jewish event, I would have been quite surprised. I grew up singing in the church choir. I come from 7 generations of United Church of Christ ministers and missionaries. And the fact that I'm Jewish today is 100% the result of philanthropists like each of you. I heard about a trip called Birthright 2000 in the fall of 1999. I wasn't searching for meaning or purpose or identity. I didn't even have a passport, and that's probably why I'm Jewish today. I heard an ad on the radio that said if you have one Jewish grandparent, you qualify for a free trip called Birthright 2000. So I called my dad and I said, Dad, you grew up Jewish. Do I have one Jewish grandparent? And he said, you had 2. And I said, I'm in. They're going to totally accept me. So I filled out my application and I went for my interview at the University of Pennsylvania Hillel. And they said, Rachel, why do you want to go to Israel? And I said, I don't. Where else do you go? They've since renamed the trip Birthright Israel instead of Birthright 2000 so that no one has that confusion. So I walked out and figured that was the end of that journey. But when I was home in New Jersey over Thanksgiving break, I received an email that said I was accepted to Birthright 2000. And while I wasn't really excited about Israel, and I didn't think that I was Jewish enough to go on the trip, if you've ever been a college student who was offered something free, you give it a second look. So I decided that going to Israel over what I called my Christmas break couldn't be as bad as being stuck in New Jersey babysitting my little brother and sister over Christmas break. So I should owe them a debt of gratitude too, and the state of New Jersey for why I'm Jewish today. So that was my decision. And I accepted the invitation to go on Birthright 2000. Actually, it was on Christmas Eve that I went to the airport, Newark Airport, to fly on the very first Birthright trip. And when I arrived at the airport, I quickly realized that this was going to be a life-changing trip for everyone else. People were there with 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and children, giving them letters to bring to relatives in Israel, giving them gifts to pass forward to people they'd never met that they had connections to when they landed. But I was there getting out of the taxi with a magazine in my Walkman and just excited to leave the country once and for all with my very first passport. As we boarded the plane, I started to have a feeling that something interesting was happening. The whole plane was Birthright participants, and every row was seated alphabetically. And when I got to my row, the Cohens, I said, hi, I'm Rachel Cohen. And they said, hi, I'm Aaron Cohen. And I said, hi, I'm Rachel Cohen. And they said, hi, I'm Adam Cohen. And I said, hi, I'm Rachel Cohen. And they said, hi, I'm Ben Cohen. And I was like, is this a joke? Because the only Cohens I knew growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, were my own family, who were, again, participants in our local church and weren't identifying as Jews. But I came to learn on the plane that being a Cohen actually had a special significance, and I wanted to learn more about it. That was the first curiosity I had about my Jewish identity on the plane to Israel for Birthright. When the plane landed in Israel, it was even more exciting. Suddenly we were whisked off the plane and the prime minister was there and the military IDF band and the film cameras were filming and everyone was so excited to welcome the first ever participants on Birthright Israel. And we started dancing and dancing in a circle in the airport hangar. And I saw people kissing the ground as we landed. And as we danced, I come to learn the hora for the first time. Round and round and round we went, but people were singing and I couldn't quite tell what it was. But I still think it was something similar to cinnamon toast and mazel toast and cinnamon toast. And I thought, well, I love cinnamon toast. I'm in. I don't know what mazel toast is, but I can get used to it. So I started being excited and open. But as I went round and round and round, I also started thinking, maybe I'm a fraud. Maybe I'm not meant to be here. I just came for the free trip. And what are they singing? And suddenly a man came to the center of our circle, and his name was Michael Steinhardt. And we got quiet, and we waited for him to speak, but he didn't. He walked back to the corner of the room, and a woman came, and she said, "My name is Judy Steinhardt. My husband is Michael, and I've never seen him cry, but he can't speak to you today because you are his dream realized." And when she said that, she stopped and pointed right at me. And I thought, not me, wrong girl. But then I took a breath And I thought, if these philanthropists that could pay for anything in the world decided to pay for a trip for me, it isn't a free trip. It's actually a gift. And suddenly, in seeing this as a gift, it changed everything. And if I gave you an extra day this week and said it was a gift for me and to live it in my honor, you'd be thinking, what would this person want me to do with my gift? So I thought, what did the major, beautiful donors behind Birthright want me to experience? And all I could come up with was to see this as a gift, to see each day as a gift on this trip of our 10 days, and to see being Jewish as a gift. So I began my journey, and I asked more than my fair share of questions. I would ask questions on our bus like, why are we going to a Dead Sea? And why are we going to a Wailing Wall? And why are we climbing Masada? And does everyone eat falafel 3 times a day, or is it just the Birthright participants? They became known on my trip as Rachel Cohen questions. And people would say, I have a Rachel Cohen question. Well, what's Israel and when was it founded? But I knew nothing. And the beautiful thing in asking all these Rachel Cohen questions is that I learned that to be Jewish is to embrace questions, is to wrestle with what you're taught. And questioning is actually what we're meant to do. It's how we grow, it's how we learn. And I really fell in love with that idea. So everywhere we went, I asked more and more questions. And every person on Birthright that you meet has a brave and amazing story. If you meet the people who drive the taxis or who operate the elevators or who work in the shuk, they'll have a story about how their family came to immigrate to Israel and how they encountered incredible hardships, whether during the Shoah or from pogroms or from the Iraq War the Iranian War. So many things that got different people's families to come to Israel, but every story has that same element. Their families were brave, their families placed value on being Jewish, and they moved for the good of the next generation. And I was so inspired by everyone I met, and I learned that to be Jewish is to be brave, it is to be courageous, and it is to place value in family and in the next generation. It's not to be Jewish just today, it's to be Jewish for all eternity. And what role can we play in making sure there's a strong Jewish future? On the last day of our trip, we went to the Kotel, and I was actually embarrassed and didn't want to go up and put my hands on the stones. I didn't feel Jewish enough. I didn't feel worthy enough. I didn't even know a Hebrew prayer. But I got swept away, as you can, by the women who bring you up to the front and they stand arm in arm with you. And I put my hands on the stones and I closed my eyes. And I said, I don't know a Jewish prayer, a Hebrew prayer, anything, but I'm so grateful. I thought of all the women with my name, Rachel Cohen, or in my family who had my DNA, my eyes, my smile, who would have done anything to have had the chance to stand at the Kotel in Israel, free and able to say a Jewish prayer, that I decided in that moment to make my life the prayer. And so I came back to Hillel on Penn's campus, straight from the airport, and knocked on the door and said, hello, I'm Rachel Cohen. I'd like to be Jewish and live here next year. And they said, this is not a Jewish dorm, which I did not know. But they said, but we do have some other things that might be interesting to you. And so they taught me how to be in an a cappella group that sang Hebrew songs. They taught me about my first high holidays that I ever celebrated. They taught me so many beautiful things. I celebrated my first Passover Seder at Hillel University of Pennsylvania and learned the story of Exodus as I knew it from the perspective of Moses and the Jewish people. And I wept, thinking how lucky we are to be free today, and how in so many times, in so many countries, Jews didn't know when they'd be free again, free to pray, free to wear a Magen David necklace, free to do anything. And I realized that this is a moment that I needed to really be excited about and proud of. I then went on to start a Birthright alumni house on Penn's campus. And my first Shabbat dinner that I hosted, I asked the rabbi, does it have to be on Friday? But he said, yes, indeed. So we ordered tons of pizzas, including some pepperoni, which the rabbi took away at the door. I was learning as I was doing it. And that's what was so beautiful about Birthright, is that however Jewish you are or aren't, you're welcomed. You're seen as one of the tribe from day one. There's no pledging that you have to do. There's no requirements that come with the invitation. And in feeling so accepted and on this learning journey I was on, I think it opened my heart to the possibilities of what it can mean to actually be Jewish entirely. So I continued hosting events on Penn's campus. And then when I graduated, I came immediately to DC, and my first call was to the Jewish Federation. And I was so nervous because I thought, what if they asked me where I went to day school or where I went to camp, or I don't have anything to say. I knew that I would fail at the game of Jewish geography, but suddenly I called Federation and I said, hi, my name is Rachel Cohen. I just moved to DC. I'm not really Jewish, but I'd like to be. And I like to do Shabbat. And they said, okay. And that was the operator. And she passed me on to the young leadership director. And the young leadership director said to me, well, we don't have a lot of luck getting young people to show up for Shabbat programs. We have a lot of luck getting young people to show up for social events and singles events and sports events. And I said, but I really want to learn how to do Shabbat. It's my favorite part of Birthright. And so she said, well, what you can do is you can create a program and we will advertise it, whatever you think that people in your position would want. And I said, what do you mean people in my position? She said, there's so many adult children of interfaith families, and we have a lot of trouble engaging them. And I said, there's more people like me? And she said, almost half of the young Jewish adults in DC are half Jewish, but we don't really know how to make them feel like they're one of us. And I thought, what a shame that they all didn't get to go on Birthright, but what a beautiful thing that Federation was trying to engage these young people. So the first program I dreamt up was called Shabbat Hoppin'. And the idea was that the first Friday of every month, we would hop to a different shul to experience the way that they do Shabbat. Because I didn't know if I was conservative or Orthodox or Reform or Reconstructionist. I had no idea. So I wanted to experience all the different ways of doing Shabbat. And our first Shabbat Hoppin' program, Federation sent out an email to all the young leadership in their database and said, here's a Shabbat Hoppin' program. It is no knowledge necessary, Shabbat 101. Come, and it'll be a learner's service. And I stood outside and I was more nervous than you could even imagine, thinking, who's going to come to this? Federation has trouble engaging us. But 80 people showed up, 80 young people. And when it came time in the learner's service that they taught us how to turn around to welcome the Shabbos bride, we all turned. And then several minutes went by until they finally said into the microphone, you can turn back around now. You could have turned around 5 minutes ago, but they didn't know they needed to tell us. And I suddenly thought, these are my people. I found you. All the people who are half Jewish and went on Birthright and didn't grow up engaged, but want to learn. And it was so beautiful because Federation made us feel at home and welcomed exactly as we are. Whether we knew to turn around for the Shabbos bride or not, we had a home in Federation, a seat at the table, and we were Jewish enough. And it was so beautiful. I've never felt more part of a Jewish family in my life until that moment that Federation created for me by believing in me to know the types of programming that I would be interested in and that would be meaningful to me. And those 80 people became my first family. At our second Shabbat Hoppin' event, I met my husband, who you heard about, Spencer Gerrol. So that worked out well. It was just an incredible gift that Federation gave me. And as I continued my Jewish journey and into philanthropy, Federation put me into a program in DC where I was partnered with a Lion of Judah. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what the necklace was, but I went to the GA and they paired me with her for a lunch, and her name was Jocelyn Crifter. And they said, this is going to be your mentor. She's a lion. And I thought it was just an amazing term for a woman. She's a lion. I didn't even realize that there was a whole society and jewelry and that this was, I just thought, I want someone to say about me that I'm a lion at everything I go after. And I met Jocelyn, and she inspired me so much about the way that she gives. She taught me about the model of federated giving, and she taught me about how you can be of service in actually serving on boards and committees. She taught me about how she raised her children to be Jewish and how she inspired in them a love of learning about the Jewish people, about traditions, about history, and about their connection to Israel. And she taught me about Tikkun Olam. She taught me about Hesed. She taught me so much that all I knew was I want to be a lion like Jocelyn as soon as I can. And it wasn't that many years later that I saved up all year to be able to make my first lion donation. And she was the first person I called to tell that I was going to do that. And she said, well, you have to join cabinet. All the women in cabinet are lions. And I thought, all the women are lions. It's a pride of lions. So the next thing I did was join cabinet. And that was a beautiful 6-year adventure where I traveled the country and traveled the world with fellow Jewish leaders and learned about the programs they were creating in their communities. We borrowed some of their programs back for DC, and they borrowed some of our programs in other communities. And we started to realize that this fabric of the Jewish community around the world is built by individuals who have ideas, and built by federations who trust those individuals. And it's that partnership and trust that I believe is going to preserve a strong Jewish future for all of us. So as the story goes, I then found out a few years after my birthright trip that my brother was interested in going on birthright. And he said, don't call me while I'm there. My trip is my trip. It's not going to be the same as yours. So I didn't call him. But when he came back, he's an actor, and he said that he was enrolling in a program at Brandeis to teach him about the Torah so he could join a troupe of actors called storytelling, where they go to different synagogues all over the country and act out pieces of the Torah. And I thought, the birthright worked again. And then 10 years after my trip, my little sister was at Penn, just like I was, and she went to Hillel just like I did, and she signed up for her birthright trip. And I was so nervous. I thought, I had a transformational experience. My brother had one, but can we go for 3? Is that even possible? And I booked myself a flight to meet her in Israel as a surprise on the last night of her birthright trip. And as I was flying there, I started to get nervous. A little too late, I would tell you, but I thought, what if she didn't have an amazing experience? What if she doesn't want to explore her Jewish identity? What'll I do? But when I got to the airport, and she was in the line thinking she was flying home, and I'd already talked to the rabbi who led her trip to ask if she could extend, I found her, and I was walking towards her, and I was nervous, but then I saw she had a Magen David necklace on. And this is something that when you're a freshman in college, you have to purchase with your own money. And I thought, this is amazing. I now have a Jewish sister. And so we stayed up all night. I ran to her and embraced her in the airport. People probably thought we were long lost sisters. And I said, Katie, I'm here. And I'm taking you to the Dead Sea. She was so confused. But we stayed up all night long, driving to the Dead Sea and in the hotel there and at the spa over the weekend, talking about her trip. And she told me all the same things that she had done. She went to the Kotel as well. She went to Masada and climbed to see the sunrise. All the same things I did. And I felt closer to her as sisters than I'd ever felt before. And I told her, it's not only this, it's not only Israel. We're now a part of a Jewish family all around the globe. Wherever we go, our birthright, passport, and our Jewish identity means we'll always have a family. We'll always have someone to entertain us for a Friday Shabbat dinner. We'll always have someone to welcome us during high holidays. We're now really where we're meant to be. And if we want, our families, when we have them, for generations to come, will also be part of this global family. And she said, I'm in. And it was unbelievable. Later that year, we had the Cohen family's first Passover Seder with 3 children who'd gone on birthright, who now wanted to celebrate. And it was led by Spencer, my husband, my now husband. He wasn't my husband then, but he led our Seder for the Cohen family. And when it came time to read the 4 questions, my dad remembered the words by heart, and he whispered them in the ear of my baby sister so that she could speak Hebrew words out loud for the first time and have her birthright saying the 4 questions at a Passover Seder. And my dad actually wept. He said he didn't know this was something that was so important until it was happening. During the Seder, he said he could see and feel his mother and all of his relatives smiling on us, so happy. Our journeys might have been long, and they might have been different than what our parents might have expected. But we came back to the Jewish people. We were lost sheep, but we were found. We were found by philanthropists who wanted to give us a chance to reconnect to our Jewish identity and to the Jewish people, and who welcomed us with the most beautiful open arms at Federation and at Birthright, made us feel like we were at home with our people. And that was a feeling that has only grown since that moment. I went on from there to start a nonprofit to raise money for Holocaust survivors living below the poverty line and to work for the United Nations. At the UN, I used my voice again and again and again on the Human Rights Council to stand up for the state of Israel. And to raise money for Holocaust survivors, I was able to leverage my stature and understanding with the White House to get $8 million donated to survivors living below the poverty line nationally. And I went to the steps of the New York City Council and I held a press conference and petitioned them to donate $3 million a year, which is now voted in New York City for perpetuity. So survivors are having a much better life, I believe, because of donors like you who invested in someone like me, because it really isn't a donation. When you support Birthright and when you support Federation, you're making an investment that grows over time. I'm your dividend 20 years later. I've been back to Israel 18 times. I'm a Wexner Fellow and a Shalom Hartman Fellow. I've done so many things in the community that I never would have dreamed of or even learned about if it wasn't for Federation guiding me and for the amazing Lions who made me see the type of wife I want to be, the type of daughter I want to be, the type of granddaughter I want to be, the type of sister I want to be. We have such amazing roles we can play as Jewish women, not just in our families, but also in the Jewish community. I joined the board some years ago of an organization called the Jewish Outreach Institute. It doesn't exist anymore, but its mission was to engage interfaith families. And their research found out that the number one determinant of how likely it is that a interfaith couple joins a Jewish community is how welcomed they feel, how welcome the non-Jewish partner feels the first time they engage with the community. And the leader of the community doesn't count. So of course, the rabbi or the Federation president is very welcoming and loving, but then they walk and they have to welcome the next person. And suddenly you as an outsider are left alone in a foreign land, which is often a beautiful JCC, but you're left alone and you don't know the words and you don't know the prayers. And I can tell you, being a fish out of water in Jewish circles is sometimes really uncomfortable. So the most wonderful thing that can happen is for a woman to come up to you and say, "Hi, my name is Sarah," or "Hi, my name is Anna," and "What's your name? I'd love to get to know you." And I think that we have this incredible role, if that's the truth. If people are afraid about intermarriage and what it will do to the numbers of Jewish people, I'm here to tell you, don't be afraid, because you're the answer. If you go up to young families and young couples and say, "Hi, my name is Dana. Hi, my name is Judy or Lori. I'd love to welcome you and learn more about your story and what brought you to be with us today," people will feel so seen, so validated. It's okay if they don't have a Hebrew name and they didn't have a bat mitzvah. You're still making them feel like they're a beautiful and welcomed part of this Jewish family. And I believe that's a unique role that Jewish women can play, because I think that if a young gentleman had come up to me when I went to these events and felt so alone or like an outsider, I would have thought, "Oh, I'm not sure if he's coming up to me to welcome me into the Jewish community or what." So I think we have a really beautiful role that we can play as sisters for each other, to make each other feel seen exactly as we are and welcomed exactly as we want to be, and invited to take a leadership role in our communities, because our communities are the ones that we are going to shape. We are going to educate the next generation and help them find pride and joy and love in their Jewish identities, just like was taught to me by my lion and was probably taught to all of you by your mothers and your grandmothers. I see so many unique roles for Jewish women to play. I can't even tell you how proud I am to be a Jewish woman and to be a woman and to be Jewish, because being Jewish is a gift. A few years ago, I founded another nonprofit. As you can see, I seem to just have this terrible disease of founding things that don't exist. And its name is Nexus. And what we do at Nexus is we travel all over the world working with heads of state to unite young philanthropists with governments to figure out what is the change they want in their country or in their continent. And we work with the White House or number 10 Downing Street or prime ministers to figure out how do we get young philanthropists engaged with the community or their country to change it, to create a brighter future. Nexus is not just for Jews, it's for people of all backgrounds, young philanthropists who really are uniquely positioned to make change in the world. But at every Nexus event, we host a Shabbat dinner. And people say, "Why? This isn't a Jewish organization. We're at the White House, we're at the UN, we're at the Prime Minister in Amsterdam's office." But the idea is, well, we're having a Shabbat dinner. People will say, "Why?" And I say, "It's Friday, which means it's Shabbat." So this is what we do. And all over the world, I have the unique privilege of sharing Jewish values with people everywhere and saying, let me show you how we pray. Let me show you our values. And I teach people about Tikkun Olam. I teach them about Jewish values and help them understand that Jews not only look after Israel, look after the Jewish people, but care about the world in amazing ways. Because at every nonprofit you could ever find, and at every philanthropy conference that I host, Jews are overrepresented because there is such beautiful alignment between Jewish values and giving and healing the world. And so I believe that it's our responsibility to make sure that everyone knows, Jews and non-Jews, that the values that Jews have are universal values, but also unique and beautiful and our own. So it's been my greatest joy to be able to work with Nexus to bring Shabbat dinners all over the world, but also to bring incredible change to different countries when they need it. Many years ago, then Vice President Biden came to me and said, Rachel, we have a problem with women on college campuses who are getting sexually assaulted. He said 1 in 5 women on college campus is raped or sexually assaulted. That means that the United States is not a safe place for women to be educated, and that's not okay. And so I gathered a group of Nexus members and we helped him launch a campaign called It's on Us. It's on us to stop sexual assault, all of us. It's not just on the bad guy who's doing the wrong thing to change his behavior. It's on all of us to protect one another, to have each other's best interests in mind. And the first partner for It's on Us, when we launched the campaign with actually President Obama and the Vice President, they said, who should be our first partner? Who's on every college campus and stands up for these types of values? And I said, Hillel. And so Hillel was the first partner. And we had the college presidents from Hillel, and we had Obama and Biden. And people might have thought that's an unlikely partnership. It might have been the Greek councils or the NCAA basketball, or who should have been the first partner. But every single problem you seek to address in the world, I think, can be addressed by starting with the Jewish leaders, by starting with Jewish women, by starting with Jewish people who have an incredible heart and want to create the world that they want to live in. And so that's how we started It's on Us. And to date, so many people have had the effect of the It's on Us effect, which is that you're trained up at your first day in orientation, that it's on us to stop sexual assaults. There's absolutely nothing on our campus. There's no tolerance for anything other than absolute adherence. And people will reach out their hand to people who are in trouble. Strangers they don't know. They'll say, I think you look like you're in an uncomfortable situation. I'd love to take you out of it. And we give out every year the Biden Courage Awards to people who stepped up, got in the way, and stopped a sexual assault in progress on campus, who say it's because of their training from It's on Us. So it's really a beautiful thing we've been able to do. But the most important thing I could say in my whole life is not all the heads of state I've worked with, or not how proud I am to be Jewish, but it's really how it feels to be a welcomed part of a Jewish family. And Federation Women was my first Jewish family. My second Jewish family was the one that Birthright gave me by making my brother and my sister Jewish, and then later my father, bringing him back to his Jewish identity after 35 years. My third Jewish family is in West Hartford, and you can see Spencer's mom, Lisa, who's with us today. And so I felt so beautifully welcomed by everyone in Connecticut that I actually did my formal conversion with a rabbi in Connecticut. And I think there's something really special about all of you women, all of you lions, in the community in which you live and the welcoming environment in which you've created. I was 20 years ago, a girl named Rachel Cohen, who identified as Christian, who sang in the church choir and went on a free trip. But today, because of philanthropists, because of visionaries, because of Federation, and because not in any small measure by some really special people who are from West Hartford, my name is Rachel Gerrol. I'm incredibly proud to be Jewish. I'm incredibly proud to be a Jewish philanthropist. I'm incredibly proud to be a Jewish woman. And I'm here to say that I'm your dividend, your investment, I hope you think, paid off. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, that was phenomenal. And I was crying throughout the thing when you made me so emotional about it. My daughter went on Birthright Israel, and she is Jewish, was brought up Jewish, but she had a similar feeling and trip. I was just texting with her, and she kept telling me it was reminding her of that trip. So one of the questions that came through was asked by Alma and Dana. One of you want to ask the question, or do you want me to do it? Dana, okay. Let me ask you to unmute. Okay.
I don't even know if I'm going to get the words out because I too was weeping. And I have no tissues around me. So I was trying not to like be a puddle of tears, like I think most women on this call. First of all, your story is beautifully told and so eloquent. And I commend you for sharing such innermost thoughts with all of us. I mean, that was really beautiful. My question is, you went to Birthright when you were maybe 18 or 19. So you lived a non-Jewish life your whole upbringing. What did your mom think of you even going to Israel, why you wanted to go? And what does your mom think today of you converting and living a full Jewish life?
It's a great question. And I didn't know actually until I asked her a few years ago. And the answer is that she feels relieved. And that wasn't a word I was expecting her to say, but going to church in my family was a 3 times a week thing. And we were the kids that our beautiful Sunday mornings, they were supposed to be, with angels singing in the house, did not start that way. They started with her screaming up the stairs, we're running late. Where are your shoes? Why aren't you dressed in the right dress? We have to go. And then the whole car ride, we're going to be late. I'm never going to find parking. What's happening? So then when we got to church, we would sing in the choir, of course, but we'd also be passing notes in the aisles, and we'd be on our Nintendos under the pew. And she knew all of this and thought that after 7 generations of her family being United Church of Christ ministers, that she was the one who'd broken the chain, that she had failed to teach her children the values that were important to her. And she really regretted that and didn't know what she'd done wrong. And when I told her that I was doing a Jewish conversion, she said, you were always meant to be Jewish. She said, I did nothing wrong. This is who you were meant to be. And she's so glad that I have faith. She said that there have been many people in her life where their children got into difficult situations medically or legally or academically or romantically, and they didn't have anything to turn to. And to have a child who has faith, she said that she knew that I'd always be okay, whether or not she was with me. And so that was what she said when I asked her, but it certainly wasn't what I expected.
Do you have Shabbat dinners with her and your father? Do you have all the holidays now together as a family?
Well, I have most of the holidays in West Hartford, but my family does do. So my dad hosts us. My parents are divorced, and my dad hosts us now. He buys holiday tickets. This is crazy. When he told us that, we were like, "You what?" But he does that, and so he buys holiday tickets in New York, where the 3 of his kids lived, and then we would all go with him. And we would have Passover Seders, but we wouldn't have them on Passover because we'd be in West Hartford then. So we do it during the week or a different time, so that my dad makes sure that we keep the traditions going. But I should actually say it's the 3 of us kids who make sure that he keeps the traditions going. It's kind of a beautiful thing we're all learning and stumbling through together. But he's reconnecting in his own ways, which is really beautiful. And sometimes we actually bring everyone up to West Hartford. That's when the Gerrols are especially sweet.
Thank you.
Rachel, did you ever talk to your mom about how her family felt when she married a Jewish man?
I didn't. But my mom's aunt is married to a Jewish man. So she grew up with 6 Jewish cousins. So I think that it was always something that was considered acceptable in the family because she had so many Jewish cousins that grew up kind of like brothers and sisters with her. So it's a very fair question. I should actually ask her. But my grandma, who was a minister, she became a minister in her late 50s, early 60s, because her husband was a minister her whole life, and she thought I could do that alongside him. She, as a minister, she passed away 2 years ago at 99, and she said to me she was so glad that I was being Jewish. And I said, why, Grandma? You're a minister. I thought you'd want me to be like you. And she says, oh, you are like me. You're just in love with the first chapter, and I also like chapter 2. So that was how she saw it, the Old Testament and the New Testament, that we were all part of the same testament.
Great. There's a question here about how we can bring some of your enthusiasm to our local institutions.
Oh, I really think that I learned to be an entrepreneur and an entrepreneurial thinker because of Federation. I think it's so easy for the programs that have always existed to continue. But when you invite in lay leaders and say, what programs would you find meaningful this year? What new do you want in your life that's additive and relevant right now in this moment? Then it's like the community is entrusting all of us to create our future. And so when Federation brought me in to Young Leadership to have those conversations, and then later in Women's Philanthropy, I was able to say, well, I need a mentor. That's what I need. I don't know what I'm doing. Or I'd love to be part of we did a Shabbat couples club at one point because we wanted to meet other young Jewish couples who wanted to get together. And Federation didn't have these programs already mapped out for the year. They really trusted us to co-create and to be an architect of the community in which we wanted to live. And I think when you flip that script and ask people, they will show up for you in ways you never could have imagined and create incredible things and bring their friends to also support those initiatives. So I think that trusting in community members and investing in their leadership and really seeing a partnership between the professionals and the lay leaders is the key to evolving and to innovating for a federation and for a community.
That's great. That's really great. There's also a question here that you said you went to Israel 18 times. What did you do 18 times that would make you want to go back? What kinds of things did you do on those trips?
That's a great question. So I often went to lead birthright trips. Even when I was 22 or 23 and only had 2 weeks off of vacation from the UN and working with the ambassador, I would volunteer myself to be a birthright trip leader. Don't worry, there's a trip educator too. I wasn't the educator. But so I would lead trips of young adults from the DC area that Federation paid for birthright. So I would go on these 10-day trips and then stay for a weekend. And then my husband started leading birthright trips as well, and alumni trips, which we would lead together. So we did that almost every summer for many, many years. So that was the most common use. And then I actually joined the board of Birthright as the first alumni on the board, which is really surprising because suddenly I was on the same board as Michael Steinhardt, who had inspired me to be Jewish, or I should actually give the credit to Judy Steinhardt. But so I was on the Birthright board, and my first day at the first Birthright board meeting, they said, we're so honored to have an alumni on the board. And I said, well, we should all be alumni. How many of you have been on a birthright trip? And of course, none of them had. We were talking to Sheldon Adelson and Charles Bronfman, and they never, they weren't my age at the time. They were the founders. So I said, well, I'm going to change that, and I'm going to take you all on a birthright trip. And so Birthright Board did our first ever trip to Israel, and we joined a different birthright trip for the first 3 days of our week there. And we've now done that every year since I joined the board. And I make sweatshirts for the whole board that says Birthright Alumni, and people kind of laugh because it's more gray and white hair than usually alumni would have. But that's what keeps bringing me back. Oh, I should actually say I was actually also trained by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be an advocate for Israel and to speak at embassies around the world. So I was brought to Israel twice by the MFA, and I got to introduce Bibi on stage and do some really amazing things. And so I'm really a big fan of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and how they can train people, no matter their previous background. If you have the heart to learn, they're willing to invest in you.
Another question, did you ever go back to Israel with your parents or your brother and sister?
Oh, that's a great question. So we actually had plans to go to Israel in 2020 with the Gerrols, but it didn't happen. A little COVID thing happened instead. But I have not been back with my brother and sister or with my dad. But my dad told me this year that he wants to go. I think the idea that we were all unable to travel made us all wonder where we wanted to reconnect to and what we wanted to see before maybe we couldn't travel again. So my dad really wants us to take him as well. And I don't know if you all heard, but today it was announced that birthright trips are back on for the summer. So we shall see.
I actually was on the Birthright site today and saw that they're starting this summer. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions for Rachel? If not, we can go to Dana. Rachel, this has been incredible. You've been wonderful. And we can't wait for you to be here with us in West Hartford.
Thank you. My lion pin is there. I'm just not.
And hopefully maybe someday you and Spencer will decide to live here and we can get you involved in our federation. That would be the icing on the cake.
Thank you.
Dana?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was so fabulous. I'm blown away by you, Rachel. I find that women, especially who find their Judaism later in life and they weren't born that way, are just so overly excited and happy and fulfilled by Judaism. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see. So thank you for so much for sharing your really heartfelt story with us. I'd love you to come to speak to every event. I mean, I'm just feeling so so filled up right now. And I think every woman on this call is too. So I just can't thank you enough for sharing your story. It's a gift. Anyway, my name is Dana Keller, and I am the chair of Federation's 2021 campaign. And we're winding down our campaign. We try to end our campaign at the end of June. But I am proud to announce that the women, of course, have raised over 800,000 ahead of last year, on our way to close our campaign at 5 million, which we've never done before. Of course, the women give at least 1/3 of our total number. It's the women, it's you, it's everyone on this call who, your words, relevant, who are mentors to all of us. I love that, additive and relevant. I wrote it down. Really, really good. I also want to tell everyone on this call about the contributions they have made and the impact it has come to on our community. We have not stopped helping individuals and families through the unexpected pandemic. In partnership, of course, with Jewish Family Services and the Jewish Community Foundation, we have never collaborated as well as we have now. We are still delivering meals to isolated seniors. We are still counseling people who need it. We are still helping out. COVID seems to be winding down, but our work has never stopped. We've also established a Jewish free loan fund that has already begun making interest-free loans to local individuals, families, and small businesses in need, helping them to achieve financial stability. And we're also focusing on long-term financial stability of our Jewish community as a whole by strengthening our endowment funds. We are partnering with the Jewish Community Foundation and the Harold Grinspoon Foundation on a new program called Life and Legacy. It will make it much easier to endow your gift to the annual campaign so that your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren will enjoy a rich and vibrant life here in Greater Hartford. And if you'd like to learn more about this, you can talk to Lori Mandel or Catherine Gonnerman at the foundation. And speaking of our children, Federation is also developing a bold and new and innovative program to make Jewish education much more accessible and more exciting than ever for every child in our community. More details are coming soon. And also, we are welcoming a rising influx of Jewish families who are leaving New York and other cities to come here to wonderful Greater Hartford. And we are welcoming them through a new venture called Destination Hartford. And finally, in the midst of a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism, the Jewish Federation is also taking concrete steps to keep our Jewish community safe with a new secure community initiative. We hope you will all attend Hineni, and Rachel, we'd love you to attend as well, our virtual community celebration on May 25th. We hope to have it in person next year. But this year, you will learn about this initiative, the security initiative, and you will also have a chance to contribute and enjoy an exclusive interview with Lior Raz, star of the hit Netflix show Fauda. To learn more, you can contact me or Haley Wasser, and there's been many emails sent. Maybe somebody can put the link in the chat. I have to start binging Fauda because I haven't seen it yet, but I'm gonna get there. We can only accomplish all these things in partnership with you, every woman on this call. your wisdom, your work, your financial support really is the bread and butter of Federation. Thank you to everyone who has committed and made their 2021 annual gift. And if you have not made your pledge to the annual campaign for 2021, please consider doing it now or at Hineni on May 25th or anytime before June 30th when we close our campaign. I'd like to recognize Carolyn Gitlin, chair of the board, if she could raise her hand. I'm sure everybody knows her. And Judy Schlossberg, who opened our event, my partner in the campaign. And I want to thank the Federation staff for all their hard work through the year and especially on this night, including Lori Mandel, Brooke Claflin, Samantha Schoenberg, Susanna McNeil, Donna Wilbur, and Simi Benita. And of course, many thanks to Haley Wasser for leading our development team to amazing new heights. Programs like this wouldn't happen without the support of our business partners. They offset the cost of our events so that more of your annual campaign gift goes back to the community. And there you can see all our beautiful business partners. I want to thank all of you for being here. We've had many, many events, and I feel like Zoom is bringing out people that maybe wouldn't have come out before, and it's bringing out even more people, and I feel like the connection is even stronger. But I'm really looking forward to hugging and seeing and talking with you in person. So we're hopeful for that in September, but we're going to stay safe and stay strong. And I hope to see all of you at Hineni on May 25th. It's going to be a special night. We're going to keep it to 1 hour and 15 minutes because we know Zoom fatigue is really setting in. But thank you again. And have a lovely evening. And we hope to see you soon.